So, thank you, councillors. For once, you've come up with some ideas that sound pretty good. You've earned your keep. So we'll start with your idea, and that is, I should buy votes. And that sounds a pretty good idea. After all, I've got more money than the opposition. Not as much as I'd like, though. I spent it. But there's a problem I've been thinking about with buying votes. And you know, the problem is some people out there are just not very moral. And so you can't trust them. They'll take your money, but damn it, they cheat. They say they'll vote for me, but then maybe they won't. And it's supposed to be a secret ballot. Or maybe I should tell them it's not a secret ballot. Or maybe I can get them to go to a polling booth where I've got one of my people, one of my soldiers watching. Do you think I can get away with that? Maybe, maybe. So buying votes is not a bad idea, right? But it is that problem. I just can't trust people. You know, not everybody is trustworthy in this society. You'll find it hard to believe, but that is the case. So you had a good idea, buy votes, we'll do that. And then you came up with another idea. Ballot fraud, you called it. And that sounds great. I'll count the votes. And I can think, how many votes do I want to win by? Well, last time, it was 98.9% I seem to remember I got. Shall I do that again? That wouldn't be credible, all right. Well, still, it would help if I can count the votes. That was a really good idea. And then you had a really nice idea. I like this one particularly, because as you say, our core skill is violence. That's what I've been good at. And you say, why don't you intimidate people? And this has a big advantage because I don't know how people will vote, but I do know whether they vote. I can see whether they go to the polling booths or not. And I know, you know, all the people in that quarter, they're, for a start, they're the other ethnic group. They all hate me. So if they go to the polling booth, which is there, I know their votes will be against me. So if I put some of my friends around in the neighborhood of the polling booth, they can sort of discourage people from going to the polls by the usual techniques. That seems pretty good. We could do that. We're good at that. So we buy some votes. We miscount the votes. We intimidate people. And then you suggested the last one, which is rather nice. And that is, you say, why don't you exclude from the ballot the people, the guys that people most want as leaders? And that does sound a good idea because, you know, that guy I jailed and had to let out of prison, he does seem very, very popular. But I've got to find some reason for excluding him. Well, as you say, he's young, so I could set a minimum age for the presidency that's just a bit older than what he is. So I'll do that. But the trouble is, of course, the next election, he'll have grown a bit older, but we could start a rumour that he wasn't born in the country. You know, there's a rumour that his mother was born in our neighbouring state. So maybe we could say he's not really a citizen. Or the best. You know how the Danish ambassador is always on at me to tighten up against corruption. Why don't I accuse him of corruption and jail him? The Danish ambassador could hardly object to that. So, there's our strategies for winning the election, even though some of my people seem not to love me. If we want to look at a practical example of that, we find Côte d'Ivoire is a good example of pretty well all of those strategies, most especially the strategy of excluding people. This is Côte d'Ivoire, not now, but a few years ago, around 2000, when a coup leader shot his way to power and then decided he had to have an election. So he held an election, but he excluded the two people who were most likely to win an election against him. He still needed somebody to stand against, and so he chose, some guy volunteered, a guy who was known to be really pretty marginal, and so the general thought, oh, I can defeat him. Well, he didn't. He was so unpopular that people thought, we'd rather have this marginal guy rather than the general. Well, the general wasn't having that, so he then disqualified the votes of the people who voted for the other guy and basically tried to do another coup. So that's a practical example of elections going wrong. So the story of the mid-1990s was a story we've reached the end of history. Elections are all we need. The story now is that elections are most definitely not all we need. What we need are checks and balances, and a democratic process is not just an election. It's a set of checks and balances that make democracy function properly.